Hey, what's up, guys? Vigilant Texan here, back with another video. Today, I've got a hard saying, which I now call the parable of the flesh. But I grew up my whole life not knowing it was a parable. And so, recently watched the Christspiracy movie, and they shared a verse in there, and like the light bulb just went off in my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Because let's just read the where they get it from, what the hard saying is. Hope y'all are having a great week. You know, glad to be making videos again. Feels good. So, but let's read from John, the book of John, Yochanan. I am the living bread which came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he shall live forever. And indeed, the bread that I shall give is my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world. The Yehudim, therefore, were striving with one another, saying, how is this one able to give us his flesh to eat? Yahusha therefore said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you possess no life in yourselves. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood possesses everlasting life, and I shall raise him up in the last day. For my flesh is truly food, and my blood is truly drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood stays in me, and I in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who feeds on me shall live because of me. This is the bread which came down out of heaven, not as your fathers ate manna and died. He who eats this bread shall live forever. And it's crazy. There's also this meme going around on the internet this week from the anti-vegan groups, and getting a lot of people a little pissed at the imagery they used here. They got a table with Jesus looking like a steak, or our Messiah. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood remains in me and I in him. So they just take that little part out and make it think like he's actually asking you to eat his flesh and drink his blood. And it's a hard thing to think about. Like, what is he saying? It sure sounds like he says, he wants you to eat his flesh and drink his blood, right? My whole life, I struggled with the parable of eating our Messiah's flesh and drinking his blood. For one thing, nobody told us it was a parable. Once I became vegan, I started walking in the Torah of life, and the parable began to bother me even more. It wasn't until recently I was watching this new movie, Christspiracy, that I realized it was a parable. How do we know it was a parable and not him referring to some pagan idea of blood atonement? Well, just like the other parables, he later reveals the meaning when alone with his disciples. But first, let's take a step back and think about the situation there in Jerusalem during the time of Messiah. At the time of his murder, the entire town of Jerusalem was abuzz with the upcoming pagan feasts and the Hebrew Passover. Unfortunately, at this time, the two were one and the same. Thousands of people flocked the city with their sacrificial lambs. Those would all need a place to pen near the temple until the ceremony. They had cages there to store your victims, along with plenty of other poor victims you could purchase. The Most High's sacred temple had become a den of thrashers and murderers, not just thieves, as the scribes mistranslated. They had to dig massive tunnels underneath the temple for all the blood shed by the innocent ones, as Jeremiah calls them. The temple had become more of a modern-day slaughterhouse than anything holy. At this pagan festival, it was accustomed to drink from the cup of Ashtaroth, which was always filled with blood. Afterwards, you'd be given a place to eat your portion of the flesh and get some of that blood splattered on you as well. So, if the common practice at the time was to celebrate by eating flesh and drinking blood, and this festival of doing so was going on all around our Messiah, then it stands to reason that people might have been asking the Messiah if he was going to eat the lamb and participate. I get it all the time. Where's your meat? Where do you get your protein from? Aren't you going to partake in the meat? Well, he probably got fed up with it and decided to give him a parable, just like he did with everything else. But he gave a big hint. He says, truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me possesses everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and they died. That's a hint. It's about food. And this is the other hint right here in the saying, my flesh is truly food and my blood is truly drink. So he makes you think, you would kind of think he's just saying sort of the same thing. My blood, you're going to eat my blood and drink my flesh. But no, he's telling you that what his food he's about to declare is his flesh is actually food. And what he's about to declare as his blood is really drink, not flesh and blood, which you're not supposed to eat and drink, right? But John 6:47 and 49, the Israelites lust for flesh in the wilderness, right? So that's the big hint. In the wilderness, what was it about? Well, according to Peter, Elohim is not pleased with sacrifices, and it is shown by those who lusted after flesh were slain as soon as they tasted it, and were buried, so that it was called the grave of lusts. He then who ate the first was displeased with the slaughtering of animals. He then who at the first was displeased with the slaughtering of animals, not wishing them to be slain, did not ordain sacrifices or desiring them, nor from the beginning did he require them. So according to Peter, it was about food, and Abba never asked for the sacrifices, right? It was always about food. Now it makes sense when he says this. And as they were eating, Yahusha took bread, and having blessed, broke, and gave to his taught ones, and said, take, eat, this is my flesh, right? And taking the cup, giving thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood, that of the renewed covenant. So the parable was how to get in covenant. Everybody around is eating real flesh and drinking blood and opening themselves up to sin and death. But if you instead eat my flesh, which is bread, and drink my blood, which is wine, then you will not commit sin and bring death upon yourself. You can't eat from the tree of life with Messiah and dine at the table with demons at the same time. That's why Peter jumped up from the table when he found out Paul had told the folks there it was okay to eat meat sacrificed to idols. Peter goes on to say, you can't even eat an idol, eat something that's sacrificed to an idol without having an unclean spirit. It's impossible, right? But anyways, just wanted to keep this one short and sweet. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the same topic in my next video about the 2 trees in the garden. But anyways, hope you all are doing well, and don't be dismayed by the signs in the heavens. Okay, we haven't even seen the Antichrist yet. Don't worry, Messiah ain't coming back just yet. All right, relax. All right, hope y'all are having a good one. Peace out.